Factories never really sleep. When the day shift clocks out, the machines keep breathing steel lungs humming through the dark. And the people who work those hours, the ones who keep the lights on when everyone else is dreaming, they'll tell you. The night shift has rules that no manager ever writes down. Don't look too long into the storage mirrors. Don't answer the intercom after 3 a.m. And if you hear a machine running that shouldn't be, you leave it alone. Because sometimes it's not broken, it's hungry. Story 1. The conveyor that wouldn't stop. I worked at a packaging plant in Ohio the summer after high school. It was one of those jobs you take when you don't have a plan. Long hours, easy money, mindless labor, the kind of place where every sound feels the same after a while. The building ran 24 hours a day, and the night shift was always short-staffed. The air was colder, the lights dimmer, and the constant hum of machines made it hard to tell what time it really was. I was stationed at Conveyor Line 3, a belt that carried sealed boxes toward the loading dock. Simple enough scan, label, stack. Except one night, the conveyor didn't stop when it was supposed to. Around 2:15 a.m., the foreman, Jerry, came over the intercom. Line 3 shut down for maintenance. Everyone else's belts slowed to a stop. Mine didn't. It kept moving, boxes sliding by faster than before. I hit the red emergency switch. Nothing. I yelled to the mechanic, "Mark, across the floor." He gave me a confused look and walked over. He pulled the circuit panel open, checked the breakers, then frowned. "It's not connected to power," he said. "That's impossible." He unplugged it completely and the conveyor kept running. We stood there in silence, watching box after box slide down the belt and vanish into the dark. "Probably a short," he muttered, "or a feedback loop." But the weird part wasn't that it kept moving. It was what started coming back down the belt. The first box returned half open, tape stripped off, barcode smeared. Then another crushed from the inside. Then a third empty, but lined with something wet and dark. Jerry came storming over, red-faced. "What the hell's going on here?" Before we could answer, a low grinding sound echoed from under the belt, like metal chewing on itself. The conveyor jerked. Sparks shot out from the rollers. Then the whole thing stopped, just long enough for the silence to make your ears ring. And then it started moving backward. All the boxes that had gone down the line came sliding back, one after another, each one torn open. Mark tried to pull the plug again. Nothing. "There's no live current," he said quietly. "It's running itself." Jerry grabbed a crowbar and pried up one of the metal panels. The smell that came out was like burnt oil and meat. Something moved underneath. For a split second, we both saw it, a hand, small and pale, pressing against the underside of the glass roller. Not flesh and bone, it looked pressed flat, skin stretched thin like plastic wrap. Jerry dropped the crowbar. It clanged against the floor, and the conveyor stopped dead. When we lifted the panel, there was nothing there. Just the steady drip of oil onto the floor. Management shut down Line 3 for the rest of the night. They said it was an electrical malfunction, told us to clock out early. When I came in the next evening, the entire line was gone, the belts, the rollers, even the support beams, all removed overnight. In its place was a tarp-covered hole in the concrete floor, roped off with yellow tape. Mark was gone too. Jerry said he'd quit, but his locker was still full: boots, keys, cigarettes, everything. Weeks passed. I moved to a different section of the plant, but every now and then, I'd hear that same grinding noise coming from under the floor. No one else seemed to notice. Then, one night, the intercom crackled to life. Static at first. Then Jerry's voice. Line 3, restart sequence. We all froze. Line 3 didn't exist anymore. Hadn't for weeks. I looked over at the far end of the warehouse, and there, through the shadows, I saw the belt moving again. No lights, no power, just slowly feeding itself into the dark. I went to tell Jerry, but his office was empty. The phone on his desk was off the hook, still hissing with static. When I picked it up, someone whispered through the line, "It's my shift now." Then silence. I dropped the phone and ran. I quit the next day, but 2 months later, the factory called to ask if I knew how to reach Jerry or Mark. They'd never picked up their paychecks. I told them I didn't know. I didn't tell them the truth that I still dream about Conveyor 3. The dreams always end the same way. I'm standing at the end of the belt. The boxes slide toward me one by one. When I open the last one, it's empty except for a time card. My name, my clock in time, and no clock out. Story 2. The janitor who worked alone after 3 a.m. Factory jobs can be noisy, exhausting, and repetitive, but being the only one there after midnight is something else entirely. I used to clean floors at a textile plant that shut down in 2019. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid steady. I worked the late shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. My only coworker was an old man named Harold who handled the mechanical maintenance. We weren't friends, exactly just two ghosts who nodded at each other across the concrete. The factory had been around since the 1950s. They said the first owner died on site and that his office upstairs was still sealed because of insurance reasons. I never believed those stories until the night Harold didn't show up. It was just after 3 a.m. when I noticed it. The usual machine hum had stopped. The entire building was silent, except for the soft squeak of my mop bucket. Then, from somewhere down the hall, I heard the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, dragging a little like someone wearing wet boots. "Harold," I called. No answer. I followed the sound toward the old wing, the part of the plant they'd stopped using years ago. The lights in that hallway flickered like dying fireflies. The closer I got, the colder it felt. At the very end of the corridor was a steel door with a faded sign that read, "Authorized personnel only, office level." That was the door everyone said led to the founder's old office. Normally it was locked, but that night it was open just a crack. And through it, I could hear a faint hum like a radio tuned between stations. I pushed the door open. The air hit me first. It smelled stale, metallic like rust and paper that had been wet once, long ago. The office was intact. Desk, chair, rotary phone, even a half-empty whiskey bottle covered in dust. But the walls were wrong. They were covered in dozens of photographs, black and white portraits of factory workers, all staring straight ahead, no smiles, no names. Each one had a small tag pinned beneath it, dates. The most recent read, March 5, 2019. That was today. I took a step back. Something crunched under my shoe. Another photo, newer. Color this time had fallen from the wall. It was Harold, standing by his locker, except his eyes were missing, not gouged, just absent. A smooth gray where his pupils should have been. The faint hum in the room grew louder, turning into a whisper. I turned around. The rotary phone on the desk had started spinning on its own. Click, click, click. Then it rang. I didn't want to answer it, but silence in that room felt worse than noise. "Hello." Static, then a faint voice, raspy, almost like it was speaking through a vent. "He doesn't like it when you mop alone." The line went dead. I dropped the receiver. When I turned to leave, the doorway was gone. Just wall. Solid concrete. I started to panic. I ran to the window, boarded shut from the outside. My flashlight beam shook across the room. The photos on the walls had changed. They were all color now. And in every single one, the faces were staring at me. One of them was holding a mop. The rotary phone rang again, this time louder, faster. Ring, ring, ring. It didn't stop. The hum beneath the floor returned a deep vibration, like something mechanical coming back to life. The lights flickered, and for a split second, I saw a reflection in the glass frame beside me. A tall figure, wearing my uniform, no eyes, no mouth. Just a wet black handprint smeared across its chest like something had tried to grab it from the inside. When the lights came back on, the door had returned, wide open. I didn't hesitate. I ran, down the hall, out the loading bay, straight to my car. I didn't even grab my time card. The next day, I called the plant to tell them I quit. The line rang once. Then a man's voice I didn't recognize answered. "Maintenance," he said. I asked if Harold was in. "No Harold here," he said. "Hasn't been one for years." I hung up. A week later, I drove past the factory at dawn. Sunlight hit the top floor window, the one from the sealed office. And for just a moment, I saw movement inside. A man in a janitor's uniform, pushing a mop slowly across the floor. He stopped, turned toward the window, and raised his hand. Not waving, reaching. The factory was demolished that summer. They said it was unsafe, structurally unstable. But every so often, someone driving that stretch of road says they see lights in the rubble, a faint yellow glow, and a reflection in the shattered glass. A man mopping the floor, alone. Story 3. The elevator that went below the basement. Factories aren't supposed to have elevators that go down. Ours did. I worked maintenance at a food processing plant in Indiana, 12-hour nights, endless noise, metal dust in your lungs by sunrise. There were 3 floors the main line, the packaging floor, and the basement where the boilers sat humming. At least, that's what I thought. One night, the freight elevator stopped between levels. Nothing new old equipment breaks all the time, but when I pried the doors open, I realized we weren't stuck between floors. We were somewhere lower. The concrete walls outside were raw, wet. The shaft extended deeper than blueprints said existed, and when I looked at the floor indicator, it showed something impossible. B2. We only had one basement. My radio crackled. It was the security guard upstairs, Tom. "You're offline on the monitor," he said. "Where the hell did you go?" I told him the display said B2. He laughed. "Nice try. That's not real." Then static. I decided to check it out, thinking maybe a wiring glitch opened some old service level. The elevator doors slid shut behind me. Automatically, I hadn't pressed anything. The hallway ahead was narrow, ceiling low, lit by orange bulbs buzzing like trapped insects. Pipes ran along both walls, dripping condensation. Every few feet, faded signs marked doors that shouldn't exist. Storage 9. Archive. Processing. Except our plant never processed anything here. I tried one handle locked, another locked. Then a third turned with a slow metallic squeal. Inside was a small room filled with filing cabinets. Each drawer was labeled with a date and a name. Dust so thick it muffled my footsteps. I pulled one open. The files weren't paper, they were photographs, Polaroids. Each one showed workers from our factory, some smiling, some mid-task, all stamped with a single red word, retired. Except half those faces were people I saw every day upstairs. Something shifted behind the cabinets. I leaned over and saw a maintenance tag bolted to the wall. Employee Record Storage, Unit B, operational since 1956. Our plant opened in 1989. The lights flickered. A heavy thud echoed from the hall, followed by the slow ding of the elevator returning. Relief hit me until I realized I hadn't called it. I stepped back into the corridor. The elevator stood open, empty, doors waiting. Inside, the control panel had changed. New buttons glowed faintly beneath the old ones. B3, B4, B5. Curiosity or stupidity made me press B3. The doors closed. No vibration, no movement. But when they opened, the air smelled like rust and cold meat. Rows of machinery filled the space. Old conveyor arms, rusted tanks, glass panels stained with something brown. It looked abandoned decades ago, yet the bulbs still burned, humming with a low electrical moan. I walked between the machines, beam shaking. Every gauge read 0, but the pipes were warm to the touch, almost pulsing, like veins. Then I heard the intercom click on above me. A voice came through hoarse, distant. Maintenance required on level B3. It sounded like Tom, except slower, as if someone was replaying him. Maintenance required. I backed away toward the elevator. The machines began to hum louder, in rhythm with the voice, and from one of the glass tanks, bubbles started rising. I ran. The elevator doors slid shut just before something heavy slammed against them. When they reopened, I was back at B2. Or so I thought. The corridor was darker now. The pipes on the walls had burst open, dripping thick black fluid, and there were footprints on the floor, bare, human, leading toward the elevator shaft itself. The radio hissed again. "You shouldn't have gone below." It wasn't Tom this time. It was my own voice. I hit the button for the main floor. Nothing happened. All the numbers blinked red except one B5. The elevator started moving on its own, down. The vibration got heavier until my teeth rattled. Then everything stopped with a jolt. The doors opened onto pitch darkness. No lights, no hum, just the sound of dripping water. I stepped out, phone flashlight trembling. The beam caught something painted on the wall in giant block letters. Employees must clock out. Below it hung rows of time cards, hundreds of them, each stamped with a date. And no names. Only numbers. The last one was still warm to the touch. It read 247 in. That was my ID number. A metallic groan echoed from above. I looked up through the open shaft, 5 levels of darkness staring back. Shapes were moving along the walls. Hands, maybe, reaching down. I sprinted for the elevator. Slammed the UP button, but the doors closed too slowly. Something scraped against the metal from outside, dragging long nails across the seam. Then silence. The car started rising. When it opened again, I was back on the main floor. Everything normal, lights bright, machines running, morning shift arriving. Tom waved at me from security. "Rough night?" he asked. I laughed shakily, told him the elevator had glitched. He looked confused. "Freight elevator. We shut that down last week. Cable snapped." He showed me the maintenance report, filed yesterday. But on the signature line was my name, and beside it, a note written in red ink. Cleared access to sublevels B2 to B5. I never wrote it. I quit that day. But sometimes, when I drive by the plant, I see the loading dock elevator light flicker through the windows, even though the building's been closed for years. Last week, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a photo grainy, black and white. I was standing inside that same elevator, eyes blank, badge clipped to my shirt. The caption said, "Employee number 247, still clocked in." Story 4. The man in the assembly line window. Every factory has one room everyone avoids. At the steel plant where I worked, it was assembly line 6, the one with the observation window. It looked like every other line in the building, presses, rollers, and robotic arms grinding metal into shape. But behind the glass wall at the far end, no one ever stood. No inspectors, no supervisors. Just an empty control booth with a cracked window and a faint handprint that never wiped clean. The older guys said a man died there back in 1998. A pressure valve exploded, and the glass cut through him like shrapnel. They sealed the booth the next morning and told everyone to work around it. By the time I started my shift there, the story was practically a joke. Someone would dare a newbie to look in the booth after midnight, swear they saw a reflection move when no one was inside. But you laugh those things off when you're exhausted, half delirious from 12-hour nights and burnt coffee. That was before I saw him myself. It happened on a Thursday. Half the lights were dead again, and the air compressors wouldn't stay balanced. I was checking a jammed section of line 6 when I caught movement in the reflection of the booth window. A man standing perfectly still inside, watching me. He wore a faded blue uniform, same as ours, but darker soaked. Maybe. I called out, thinking maybe maintenance had been sent in. No response. When I blinked, he was gone. Later that night, the machinery started up on its own. No one near the controls, no power surge, just on. The belts ran empty for a solid minute before shutting off. When I asked my supervisor, Ed, he went pale. "Don't mess with that line after hours," he said quietly. "If it starts moving, let it." I laughed. He didn't. The next night, I stayed late to finish my quota. Around 2:30 a.m., the power flickered, the overhead lights buzzed, and the air got heavy like static before a storm. Then the intercom crackled, not words at first, just breathing. Line 6, ready for inspection. It wasn't Ed's voice. It was low, deliberate, like someone forcing sound through water. I looked toward the window. The man was there again. This time, closer, his hand pressed against the glass. I should have left right then. Instead, I grabbed my radio. "Ed, someone's in the booth." No answer, just a faint metallic echo, like the sound of footsteps inside the walls. The line started moving again, rollers spinning, sparks flying, but nothing was on the belt. And then, from behind the glass, the man lifted his other hand and pointed not at me, but at the emergency stop switch beside my leg. I hesitated, then pulled it. Everything went dark. For a few seconds, the entire factory fell silent except for a faint tapping. Tap, 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 coming from inside the control booth. I raised my flashlight. He was still there now, pressed against the glass from the inside, mouth open in a scream I couldn't hear. Then something cracked. The window split down the center, not shattered, just opened. Like it was breathing. The next thing I remember is waking up on the floor. The belt was still, the lights were on, and the booth empty again. When I told Ed what happened, he didn't look surprised, just tired. "You pulled the stop switch." I nodded. He sighed. That's what he wanted. He died trying to shut it down. Pressure blew before he made it. He turned away before I could respond. "You'll hear him again," he said quietly, Everyone who touches that switch does. I didn't believe him until 3 nights later. I was driving home, windows down, radio low, halfway across the bridge near the river. The speakers hissed that same static hum from the intercom. Line 6. Ready for inspection. I slammed the radio off. It kept playing. When I showed up for my next shift, the factory was locked down. Emergency tape everywhere. They said Ed had an accident crushed under a press that reactivated unexpectedly. Line 6, of course. The weird thing, the cameras caught it all, but in the footage, Ed isn't alone. Behind him, in the reflection of the booth window, someone standing there. Same blue uniform, watching. The plant shut that section for good after that. Management sealed the booth with steel plating, covered the glass completely. But those of us who worked there still knew. Every few weeks, someone would hear the intercom buzz around 3A, even though it was disconnected from the grid. Always the same phrase. Line 6. Ready for inspection. 6 months after I quit, I went back one night. I parked outside, just wanting closure proof that it was all superstition. Through the cracks in the siding, I saw a faint light flickering inside, the hum of machinery, and the outline of that window, still glowing softly behind the metal plate. Then, just for a second, I saw a hand press against it, the imprint glowing from underneath, like heat through frost. I told myself it was my imagination, but when I got home, there was grease on my palm, and a faint word smeared across it in dust. Inspected. Story 5. The locker room that locked itself. There's something about factory locker rooms after midnight that feels wrong. It's not the smell or the flickering lights, it's the quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you feel like someone else is still there, breathing right behind you. I worked at a plastics molding plant in Pennsylvania, 3rd shift, 12 to 8. Our locker room sat deep under the main floor, down a flight of concrete stairs that always leaked water from the pipes above. No cameras, no signal, no sound but your own footsteps. Every night, around 3 a.m., I'd head down there to grab a snack or check my phone. The others avoided it. They said a worker had collapsed in one of the showers a few years earlier, heart attack, supposedly, and that maintenance had never replaced his locker, number 117. I didn't believe in ghosts. I just wanted to sit somewhere quiet. One night, the foreman dismissed us early. A power surge had killed half the presses, and the generators were overheating. I took my break downstairs, grabbed my bag from the bench, and started scrolling through my phone. After a few minutes, the lights flickered. Then one bulb near the mirror popped glass showering across the tile. Everything went dim and yellow. I sighed, got up to leave, and realized the door had swung shut. When I turned the handle, it didn't move. Locked. From the outside. At first, I thought someone was screwing with me. The guys upstairs like to prank new hires, so I shouted. Very funny. Idiots. No answer, only the slow drip of a leaking pipe. I tried my phone. No service. Of course. Then came the smell. Not sweat or chemicals, something metallic, like rusted water. When I looked down, a thin stream of red liquid was snaking across the tile, seeping from under one of the lockers. Number 117. I hesitated, then crouched. The puddle wasn't blood too dark, too thick, but the longer I stared, the more it looked like it was moving against gravity, creeping toward my boot. I backed away and grabbed the handle again. Still locked. Behind me, one of the showers turned on. Just a trickle at first, then a full rush of water. Steam rolled across the floor, carrying that same metallic smell. I called out, "Who's in here?" The sound that came back wasn't water. It was breathing, wet, heavy breathing echoing off the tile. I turned off the shower, no one there. The curtains still swayed, though there was no draft. And written on the fogged mirror above the sinks were 3 words: "Clock out now." I wiped it away with my sleeve. The moment my hand touched the glass, every locker door slammed open at once. Metal clanged through the room, echoing in my chest like thunder. Inside the open lockers were coveralls, boots, half-finished lunches, all things that should have rotted years ago, but the air was freezing. And then the lights went out. I turned on my phone flashlight. It flickered weakly. In that narrow cone of light, I saw water running along the floor backward, uphill, toward locker 117. The door of 117 was still closed. It rattled softly, like something inside was breathing against it. I told myself it was just air pressure, but when I stepped closer, I heard whispering, too low to make out words, just the cadence of speech. Then, from the dark behind me, a voice whispered, "Shift's over." I spun around, nothing. When I turned back, the locker door was open. Inside hung a single work jacket. It looked new. On the chest was a name patch, the letters barely legible under grime B. Howard. I recognized it. That was the man who died here, the one everyone mentioned. The jacket swayed as if a breeze passed through, and a faint humming began low, rhythmic, almost mechanical. It took me a second to realize it matched the sound of the molding presses upstairs. Then the jacket fell, and something hit the floor beside it, a time card punch. I picked it up. Fresh ink. My name. In 0314 A.M. No clock out. The humming grew louder. From the walls now, through the vents. A deep vibration shook the mirrors. Every locker began to slam open and shut again, faster and faster, until the noise blended into a single roar. I dropped the punch and covered my ears. Through the chaos, one door stayed still, locker 117 wide open. Something moved inside. A figure tall, featureless, soaking wet stepped forward, leaving black footprints that steamed on the cold tile. It wore the same uniform I did, same boots, same face. Mine. I stumbled backward, slipping on the water, and hit the wall hard. The figure tilted its head, studying me like a reflection that had learned independence. Then it whispered, in my voice, "Don't be late again." It stepped back into the locker and pulled the door shut from the inside. Silence. The lights flickered back on, bright white. The floor was dry. The lockers stood open and empty. When I grabbed the handle, the door opened easily. The hallway beyond was empty. I went straight to the foreman's office, shaking, told him I'd been locked in. He frowned. "Locked in, that room's been sealed since last month. Water damage took out the whole floor." He showed me the maintenance report, signed off by me. Time stamped 314 me. I quit that night. 2 weeks later, a friend from the plant called me. They'd reopened the lower level for cleanup. The crew found something wedged behind one of the lockers, a rusted punch clock still ticking. Inside, a single card. Name B. Howard in 0314, aiming out 3:14 a.m. And scrawled at the bottom, faint but visible, "Shift never ended." Now, every night around that time, my phone buzzes once. No caller ID, no voicemail, just a single text that says, "Clock out." Story 6. The security guard who watched himself on camera. People think working security on a factory night shift is boring. You sit in a booth, drink bad coffee, and stare at cameras until sunrise. Most nights, That's exactly what it was, until the cameras started showing me things that weren't supposed to exist. The plant was an old steel fabrication site, built in the 1970s. Half the buildings were condemned, the rest ran skeleton crews. I worked the overnight watch, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., alone except for the distant hum of machinery still running on automation. My routine was simple hourly patrols, radio check-ins, and monitoring 24 CCTV feeds that covered every corridor and loading dock. The monitors flickered, lines of static crawling across their edges like tired eyes trying to stay awake. The job was peaceful until it wasn't. It started small. One night I noticed camera 12, the one pointed at the east stairwell, looped a few frames every minute. The same shadow moving past the door again and again. I thought it was a glitch, maybe condensation on the lens. But when I rewound the feed, the timestamps were all different. That same figure, same stride, same tilt of the head kept appearing at random hours. Sometimes 1 a.m., sometimes 3 a.m., sometimes 5 p.m. the previous day. Always walking down, never up. I called maintenance in the morning. They said the stairwell was sealed years ago, collapsed after a flood. No access, no lights, no power. That night, camera 12 showed movement again. This time the figure stopped at the bottom step, turned, and looked straight at the camera. The feed went black. By 2 a.m., half the monitors were cutting in and out. On camera 4, I saw the break room, empty. Then, for one frame, someone sitting at my usual chair. Same posture, same jacket, same patch on the shoulder. Security. I stared at the screen until the image returned to normal. Empty room again. I told myself I was tired, losing track of time. But when I checked the live camera timestamps, the break room feed was 30 minutes ahead of real time. Like it was showing what was about to happen. At 2:31 a.m., the monitor showed me getting up from the chair, leaving the booth, flashlight in hand. I hadn't moved yet. Then my radio crackled. My voice said, "Patrol complete. East wing clear." I didn't touch the mic. The timestamp on the radio log printed automatically. 2:31 a.m. Exactly what the camera had shown. I grabbed my flashlight and walked the east hall anyway. The air down there was colder, metallic, echoing. Water dripped from somewhere unseen. Halfway to the stairwell, my beam caught footprints in the dust, fresh ones, heavy boots, same tread as mine, leading toward the sealed door marked East Stair Access, closed. The steel latch was rusted shut, but when I touched it, it moved easily, like someone had been opening it every night. I pushed it open. The stairs beyond descended into blackness. No lights, no sound, just the faint smell of damp concrete and something older like burnt metal. I called down. My voice echoed back, distorted, slower, lower, as if someone else repeated it a second later. Then a faint scrape like boots on steps coming up. I slammed the door and backed away. The scraping stopped. My radio hissed. "Don't lock me out." It was my voice again. I ran back to the booth. Every monitor was flashing static except one the camera pointed at me. It wasn't live. It was delayed, maybe 30 seconds behind. On screen, I saw myself rush in, slam the door, look at the monitors just like I was doing. Then the version on the screen looked directly into the camera and smiled. I didn't. The feed froze on that frame. I yanked the main breaker to kill the system. All the monitors went dark except camera 12. It flickered back to life, faint grayscale glow. The stairwell again. Only now, The camera angle had changed. It was facing up, toward the door. Someone stood there. Uniform, security patch, flashlight in hand. Me. I should have run right then, but I needed proof, something to explain what I was seeing. I grabbed the DVR drive, stuffed it in my bag, and stepped outside. The parking lot was empty except for my car and another identical one parked beside it. Same make, same model, same dent on the bumper. I reached for the handle of mine. At the same time, the other car's door opened, and someone stepped out wearing my jacket. We both froze. He raised his flashlight, so did I. The beams crossed, blinding each other for a second. When the glare cleared, he was gone. I quit the next morning, left my badge on the desk, told the day supervisor the cameras were malfunctioning. He shrugged. Yeah, we've had doubles on the feed before, he said. Ghost buffer, old tech. But when I went to hand him the DVR drive, it wasn't in my bag anymore. Just a blank time card stamped in 11 p.m. Out. A month later, a friend from maintenance called me. They were cleaning out the old security booth after an electrical fire. He found a burnt monitor still looping footage from the night I quit. In it, I was sitting at the desk, staring at the screens, never moving. He said the timestamp kept cycling between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m., like the shift never ended. Sometimes, when I drive past the factory, I can see the lights still glowing in the booth window, just one monitor, always on. If I slow down enough, I can almost make out a shape inside someone sitting where I used to sit. And if I stop, the light flickers. The screen turns toward the road. For a split second, I see my own reflection looking out. Now, every night around 2:31 a.m., my phone vibrates once. No caller ID, no message. When I check the notification history, it reads, "Live feed connected. Factories aren't supposed to be haunted. They're supposed to be loud, predictable, mechanical places where logic rules and ghosts don't belong." But the truth is, the night shift changes everything. When the machines stop humming, when the lights buzz and the only footsteps you hear are your own, you start to notice how alive those walls really are. Because factories remember, they keep the sound of every accident, every scream, every moment of silence after. And the people who worked there, the ones who vanished or never clocked out, they're still on the schedule somewhere. Every story tonight had the same heartbeat. The conveyor that wouldn't stop. The janitor mopping floors in a building that shouldn't exist. The elevator that went below the basement. The man behind the assembly line window. The locker that locked itself. The guard who watched himself on camera. Different names. Different towns. Same time somewhere between 2 and 3 a.m. That's the hour when the factory breathes. When it remembers who it lost. And when it wants new names to fill the empty slots. So if you ever work a night shift alone and you hear machinery start up without power, or footsteps echo from a sealed floor, or a voice that sounds almost like your own, don't go looking. Because the moment you do, you're already part of the system, and some machines don't turn off. They just wait. Shift log update. Employee status active. Time 3:00 a.m. End of shift. Thank you for listening to these 6 true factory night shift horror stories. If you've ever worked through the dark and heard something you couldn't explain, maybe you didn't imagine it. Maybe the factory just noticed that you were still awake.